Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. Welcome back, everyone. Great to have you here today for the next lesson learned in leadership, another mentoring moment. Today's lesson is about how you can tell how you're doing as a leader. I'll give you a hint. It isn't looking at yourself. I'm going to talk all about that in just a second. But first, I'm Greg Storch. I'm the owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide bartered coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Now, last week, we continued the Mentoring Moments in Leadership series with a lesson about how important it is for leaders to define reality. While it's good to have an optimistic outlook, leaders must deal in reality in order to successfully lead their followers. Now, if you weren't able to join us last Wednesday for the Weekly Roar, or if you need to get caught up, or maybe you just want to watch that session over again, you can always access all of my free video resources on my website at www.lion-enterprise.com. Click on the Lion's Pride Library menu to find video number 132 for last week. And while you're in the Lion's Pride Library, make sure you look around and stay a while. It's a free resource, and it's a great way for you to get more of the roar. Okay, let's jump right into today's topic that I'm calling, how are you doing as a leader? I think you all would agree that leaders inevitably make things better or worse for the people who follow them. Evangelist Lee Roberson even tells us that everything rises and falls on leadership. It's what my mentor John Maxwell has taught for decades after hearing Roberson speak back in the 70s. John actually speaks to this in one of my favorite books of all time that's called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Even in the very first chapter, actually, John speaks about the law, the lid, and how leadership ability determines the person's level of effectiveness. You see, it's pretty simple. When you're a good leader, your team gets better. Your department or your directorate shines, and your organization as a whole excels. But replace that with a bad leader, and everyone that leader impacts just has a harder time. It's leadership that makes every endeavor either bitter or better. The longer I spend in leadership roles and the longer I continue learning about leadership, the more I understand just how leaders can impact the things and the people around them. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about on a large scale, okay? I'm talking about the presidency. You know, every 4 years, Americans go to the polls to elect a leader for their country. A lot of people make a choice on who they're voting for by judging how the current leader has changed their personal circumstances while they were in office over the previous 4 years. Most Americans understand that their current situation or their current conditions are the result of who their leader is at that time. Well, the same goes at a smaller level for leaders too. Any leadership role where our actions and decisions impact others has the same effect. And if followers don't like their conditions, what do? They change leaders. It's how Ronald Reagan got elected in 1980. All he did was ask one simple question, and that was, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And this brings me to the whole concept of today's weekly roar. If you want to know how you're doing as a leader, you need not look any further than your people. Leadership expert Max Dupree even said it when he said, the sign of outstanding leadership appears primarily among the followers. If you were to remove all other factors out of the equation of success, such as the economy or your personnel, level of teamwork, the availability of resources, timing, the right chemistry, or even luck, the one thing all good organizations have in common would be good leadership. Think of leadership impact on its followers a lot like the heredity of your own health. My mother had cancer. My sister had cancer. So the chances are greater that I could have it someday as well. Our physical health is greatly influenced by our parents' physical health. Well, this is a great analogy for leadership because it's similar in the way that when the leader is healthy, the people they lead tend to be healthy too. Well, unfortunately, the opposite is also true, and we need to have awareness around that. An unhealthy leader creates unhealthy followers. But don't worry, they tend not to lead for long. Usually we see this as a high attrition rate in companies where people leave because of a bad boss. The saying's true that people join organizations, but they leave people. Now, I've talked about how important it is, actually, how one of the primary responsibilities we have as leaders is to develop other leaders. I think the development of more leaders is how we leave our legacy and build future generations of leaders to follow us. If you've ever wondered how you're doing as a leader, and you probably should be asking yourself that question, you can find your answer by asking a better question, and that is, how are the people I'm leading doing? The really, really good leaders are intentional about developing their people. But as I said before, good or bad, leaders will always impact their people. So if you're wondering how you're doing or want to know whether or not a leader is successful and effective in their role, don't listen to the leader, look at their people. When I was in the Navy, I was an instructor for an advanced school that taught dental equipment repair. The school was 6 months long, and I taught things like basic electricity and electronics, woodworking, plumbing, welding. Now, upon graduation, the dental techs that attended that school would begin working in the specialized field of dental equipment repair. Now, it was my job as their leader to ensure I trained them well enough that they would go on to have successful careers. I trained almost 60 sailors in that school over 3 years. And of course, I didn't follow all of their careers, but the one sure way for me to know if I was successful or not was by hearing back from my former students. Now, that was 1993 through 1996 that I was teaching at that school. Here, I'll do the math for you. That's 27 years ago. And would you believe that just earlier this year, I was tagged in a post on Facebook by one of my former students who had since retired from the Navy and had just received a major promotion to regional operations manager for a dental equipment company in Raleigh. In his post, he said, "Thank you, Greg Storch, my repair school instructor in the Navy. Thank you for pushing us to be the best we could be. Your instruction was life-changing." Now, That's just a recent example, but I've received a lot of messages and emails over the years from former students telling me the positive impact I made on their careers and in their lives. So, if you ask me how I know whether or not I'm a good leader, I know all I have to do is look no further than how well those I led are doing, even if it's decades later. So, if you find yourself at a point in your leadership where you want to see how you're doing yourself, or say you want to look at the leadership of somebody else, maybe it's somebody in your organization, well, I want to share 4 questions with you that you can use to help you make that assessment. Okay, here we go. Now, the first question to ask is, are people actually following? I know it's kind of silly, but we already know that in order to be a leader, you have to be leading people. You have to have followers. If you're a leader, then not only do you have to have a vision and be headed in that direction, but you have to convince others to go along with you. It's like the old Afghan proverb says that if you think you're leading and no one is following you, then you're only taking a walk. Having followers makes you a leader, but it doesn't necessarily make you a good one. As we grow and develop in our leadership, we also develop trust and confidence in those we lead. And that trust should continue to grow as we become more and more competent as leaders. Every time a good leader makes the right moves and has the right motives behind them, the relationships between the leader and the follower get stronger, and then the team gets better and better. One of the biggest mistakes a leader can make is to assume that they'll have loyalty from their followers. And loyalty isn't really something that you can demand from them. It's built over time by establishing relationships and earning trust. Loyalty is a reward for leaders who earn it. See, good leaders, they put people first. And when they do that, they earn the respect of their followers and it increases their followership. This doesn't come from our leadership positions. It comes from good performance backed by good intentions. So that's why you can get a pulse check on how you're leading or how others are leading by looking at whether or not people are following. Now, another great question you can ask is, are the people changing? Now, what this question's getting at is whether or not people are willing to make change in order to make progress. There's no way to really make any progress without change. If I've said it once, I have said it a million times. We don't get anywhere in life without the help of others. And that's true for leaders as well. Leaders can only capitalize on opportunities if their followers are willing to make the needed changes to do it. We have to be able to cultivate a willingness in our followers to follow us into the unknown based on a simple trust in our vision. And that can be hard to do if they aren't willing to change. But what's ironic about this whole thing is that leaders don't actually change people. Leaders are actually the agents of change. We become agents of change when we create the right environments that help people make the decision to change. People can only reach their potential when they're willing to make the necessary changes. And they're not likely to make those changes unless an effective leader is there to help facilitate that process. That's why looking at people's willingness to change can be used as a litmus test on how well a leader is leading. Now, I love this third question that we can ask ourselves to pulse check how we're doing as leaders, and that is, are our people growing? Having a willingness to change is one thing, but If you want your organization to be able to reach its highest potential, people are going to have to be willing to grow too. One of the biggest responsibilities we're given as leaders is to foster the growth and development of our followers. It's the difference maker between being stagnant and moving forward, personally and as an organization. Now, some of the best leaders I know have spent their time helping their people grow. They didn't just make sure we had the skills we needed to do our jobs, but they helped us in our personal lives too. They weren't focused on us as just employees, but also as people. If a leader doesn't believe in their people won't believe in themselves, and that's sure to stifle their growth. Remember, unhealthy leaders have unhealthy followers. The development and growth of our followers has to be a top priority for us as leaders. And if the people aren't growing, that's a direct reflection on the leader. That's why this is such a great question to ask if you want to know how you or how someone else is doing as a leader. Are the followers growing? Now, the last question that you can ask is whether or not the people are succeeding. As leaders, it's our responsibility, of course, to produce results. And here's something to think about, though. Leaders might impress others when they succeed, but they impact others when their followers succeed. It's important to ensure our followers are succeeding. What's interesting about that statement is that as leaders, our success should actually be measured through the performance of our people. With that said, if you look at your people and they aren't following, changing, growing, and succeeding, then look no further than yourself. I'd ask, what's wrong with me, not them? And I'd find ways I can do things differently in order to help the team win. If the followers are succeeding, then the leader's doing well. And if not, there might be a chance that the leader is struggling, making the shift from being a high achiever himself to a leader. Achievers are used to performing at high levels, reaching their goals, and that's how they judge their progress. And when they transition into a leadership role, they have this expectation for their followers to do the same, to be self-motivated. And when they don't perform as expected, then the leader asks, what's wrong with them? Asking whether or not the people are succeeding gives us a good idea on whether or not the leader has the ability to put others first, to focus on them. So those are the 4 things that you can use to assess if you want to find out how you're doing as a leader. Are the people following? Are they changing, growing, and succeeding? If so, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. If not, find out what area is lacking and focus on making improvements to become a more well-rounded leader. Leaders should lift others up, not tear them down. And I love what Peter Drucker said about it. He said, leadership is the lifting of a person's vision to higher heights, the raising of a person's personality beyond its normal limitations. In other words, if you want to know how a leader is doing, all you have to do is look at the people. All right, everyone. Short, sweet, and to the point. That's going to do it for me today. Hey, I hope you're going to come back next week when I explain to you why the saying, a leopard can't change his spots, is important for a leader to understand. If you want to keep running to the roar, then all you have to do is come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time and join me for the weekly roar. Thanks everybody for showing up. You know I appreciate you joining me every Wednesday, so thank you so much. And until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.